on this episode of TherapyBites Art Lab.
Hey TBAL Team, thank you for joining us for another fabulous episode of TherapyBites Art Lab, and that stands for Accurate Realistic Thinking, Life-Affirming Beliefs. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Kevin Cahill in the studio today, or as the Art Lab as we call it, and he is the first actual change specialist that I've met. And I've been in the behavioral health field for 38 years, and I'm so excited to have him on. We're going to talk about how to accept, embrace, and adapt to change coming up next.
Welcome to TherapyBites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the TBAL Team.
And it is Kevin T. Cahill. He is north of us, up in the country of Canada. We love our northern brothers and sisters up there. Glad to have him here. Kevin is an international best-selling author. He's a change management specialist and a motivational speaker, and we're all here ready to be motivated. Kevin, thanks for coming on the show today, and we just look forward to what you have to share with us.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute privilege and honor to be here with you today. It's a little chillier up here in Canada, but great to have this conversation with you today.
Awesome, awesome. And you know, as I said in the intro, I've actually never met a change specialist. I didn't know you folks were out there because I just think in our world today, things are changing so rapidly. You know, you have changes in, goodness, technology. Some of this is going to blow the minds of our younger listeners, but there was a time, and those of you listening can't see this, I'm holding up my Apple 12 Pro Plus. Yes, I know it's already outdated, and I know that this is a bubble burster, but these actually did not exist when I was, until I was, in my mid-20s. So technology is changing. Now we're looking at space travel. We're looking at electric cars. I mean, all this technology. The other day I was having a conversation with my wife, and then the day after on my Alexa devices started popping up sales ads to buy the stuff I was talking with my wife about. And I thought, forget about the U.S. government. You know, be afraid of Amazon. They're listening. Jeff is listening. Jeff, are you there? Are you listening to this? And so, Kevin, I mean, I'm sure that you run into this all the time, people that are just freaked by change. And how do you deal with that? I mean, what are some, pearls of wisdom that you share with people?
Along my journey of writing and journaling and speaking, one of the things that really came to me is that in all systems of life, whether it's human or nature, we're really blessed up here in Canada where we have 4 distinct seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. There's a pattern to everything. And what I realized is that every single system in life is circumambulating 4 major questions. And now, circumambulating, a really big word, but just it means that it's always surrounding it. And you're either going to be in all of them at the same time, or you're going to go sequentially through. And you're going to go through those moments of how do you prepare for change? And for most of us, we spend the first 20, 30 years of our lives learning how to prepare for change. We might not know that that's what we're learning to do, but we're gaining all of the tools, whether it be from our families or our schools or from our peers around us, our coaches in sport, or whatever the positive role models around us are. But then sure as life exists, we're going to be thrown in change. And whether it's you lose your job, you get divorced, you face a life-threatening illness, maybe you have a career-altering injury, but you're thrown into it. Most of us don't choose to change. Most of us will run as far away as possible from change. But the universe has a wonderful way of leading us down a path. And if we don't pay attention to the silent hand of the universe or the silent whisper of the universe, it eventually becomes a silent nudge or a silent punch or even a silent sledgehammer over the head.
Yes.
And we're in the middle of it. And all change usually comes with suffering. We're in the big pile of crap. We don't know how we're going to get through. We don't know what's on the other side. We don't know what's going to come next. And we're in it. And the second element of change is, how do you get through suffering? How do you pull yourself up? How do you keep going? How do you lose the love of your life, but somehow be able to find beauty around you? And that leads to the third stage of change. And that is, how do you find joy out of suffering? This is one of the things that I think is missed in a lot of psychological text, self-help text, is learning how to say, that was horrible, but it was also amazing. Because if I didn't get fired from my dream job, I wouldn't have found my passion. Or if I didn't get cheated on and dumped, I wouldn't have found this next person. Or if I didn't suffer a brain injury and was left in a bed for 6 months, I wouldn't have appreciated the power of meditation. And it's that power of finding joy in suffering that allows us to move forward. But much like the stages of the seasons, there's still that fourth part. And to me, that is, how do you mature and serve? Because if you do not mature out of going through hell and then be able to help others, what's the point of going through it in the first place? If you've been given the gift of the universe to be able to make it through life's biggest adversities, then it is your responsibility to be a light and help others.
Oh, fantastic. I love where we're going with the conversation. One of my favorite quotes comes to mind. I didn't say it. I didn't come up with it. Wish I would have. I don't know who did. You can Google it. But the quote is, never waste a hurt. I probably heard that, to my memory, back in the 80s or something. Maybe it's the 90s, but never waste a hurt. But Kevin, there's something that I noticed that you didn't do that I hear a lot of my colleagues do, and I don't think they should. And that is, they immediately start joining with the patient to catastrophize difficult experiences. And I think that we live in a culture, therefore, that is becoming allergic to life. What I'm seeing myself on social media is, if something becomes difficult, just run the other way. And what we try to teach in the ART lab, accurate, realistic thinking, and life affirming beliefs, it is a lab. We do train and teach this stuff and study this stuff. Every new patient, every new individual helps us learn more about developing engineering resilience. But what we find people doing, people of our ilk included, is really helping people become less resilient. I mean, there are people in my profession that tell people, if a job gets difficult, quit. If something is difficult for you, get rid of it, run away from it. If there's a difficult relationship, delete that relationship. I mean, it's almost psychologically as if the people's favorite button psychologically in their life is a delete button. Difficult experience, delete. Difficult relationship, delete. Difficult person, delete. And I think our lives become less by all the deleting, not more. What are you seeing out there in your aspect of this this social phenomenon?
Well, I think you're 100% correct. And at the end of the day, regardless of the fact that we're in 2022, we are still controlled through evolutionary biology for thousands of years, where our brains, our prehistoric limbic brain, is hardwired to protect us from hurt, but also to protect us from hurtful memories, right? It's a common thing that many survivors of trauma, they'll forget what happened in their traumatic experience because they don't want to relive it. But my father, and my journey really started 2.5 years before I was born, when my father quit drinking. And he joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was a prolific speaker for the rest of his life, sharing his message and helping others. And one of his famous sayings, and I live with it to this day, long after he's been gone, is sympathy in the dictionary is between shit and syphilis. And I know from some of your other podcasts, right? Like you put the R
heard it.
That's hilarious.
Parents, I'm sorry we didn't put the alert, but we're not going to bleep that out.
That's good.
That's awesome.
To carry on from what you were saying is, misery loves company. And it's so easy in our world. And I drew some fire a few years ago by really taking aim at the concept of survivor, because at the end of the day, very few people survive anything. They just get through it, and they get through it until the next thing. But it's so easy to jump into the proverbial shit pile of life with other people. Misery loves company, rather than stand outside of their shit pile and shine a light. And I think this is, in social media, all you have to do is look around, and people will jump on the poor me's or the why me's and they're not really doing anything except enabling that person to stay a victim to their story, rather than help them stand on top of their story and be a victor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a whole industry of professional victims, and I recommend a lot Viktor Frankl, which it may not be politically correct now. The title of the book, Man's Search for Meaning, is talking about mankind. It's not a gender thing, but I remind people who talk to me about, but I went through this, that, and the other thing, and I had no power, had no control. And I said, wait. I believe, and based on how I know the brain works, a little bit of neuroscience here, is we always get to decide what we think, which means we get to decide our direction in life. And pardon me, no offense to anybody, but if you've not been in a Nazi concentration camp with soldiers with real live guns who have killed your mother, killed your father, killed all your friends and neighbors and loved ones, your wife, and some say his unborn child, by the way, and the man that still said, everything may be taken from us, but the last and greatest of all things, and that is the power to choose our own way. But we have people in my profession who are so diagnosis happy that we run around labeling everybody. It's almost as if it's not cool unless you have some disability a riddled diagnosis. And I've actually asked people, you've been told that you have this label. I mean, how stuck are you on it? I mean, are you that heavily invested in it? I mean, what if I told you that you didn't have to have this label? I mean, why would you shrink down your humanity to let yourself be defined by this label out of a book? The book is the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. I've got the first copy on my shelf in my office. It's about yay thick, and then the next one was thicker. Now the next one is a freaking encyclopedia of disabling labels. And why not just see ourselves with humans as nearly unlimited potential? But for some reason, people don't want to believe that. Why do you think that people want to adapt this victim mentality?
In all honesty, it's so much easier to allow someone on the outside to label and accept that label. And yes, up here in Canada, we have free healthcare, but at the end of the day, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system that is keeping people small. And it is, the pharmaceutical companies, at the end of the day, they don't make any money by having people go off medication. They make the money by ensuring that people will stay on that medication for years and years. And rather than look in the mirror at where does the root of those problems come from, it's so much easier just to say, I am this label. And as you mentioned with the DTSM, at the end every year, more and more labels get added because someone says, well, I don't perfectly fit that label. All right, well, let's create a new label for you.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you might find it interesting, and this is such a bizarre. I've been in this field for 38 years. This is such a bizarre thing that you can actually go to a website and you can recommend more and new ways to label people. Imagine if the American Heart Association had a website where civilians, non-physicians can get on and label new heart disorders. How bizarre is that? I mean, it's almost as if health, normality should be the diagnosis, because so few people want to diagnose themselves with being just, I'm just a normal, boring guy. I don't have a diagnosis. I'm just a boring guy. And trauma's another one. It's called semantic creep, actually. And trauma has become so popular that you can't be cool you can't be special unless you have trauma. And we have a meme that says trauma's like chicken. Everything tastes like chicken. Everything becomes a trauma. Now there's trauma because your parents didn't hug you enough, and trauma because you didn't get the toys you wanted for Christmas, and trauma because you were sad a lot as a kid and your parents didn't notice it. And all of a sudden, there is no trauma because everybody has trauma. It's just a labeling frenzy, and there's to your point, there's a lot of money to be made out of making people sick. It's not for nothing, as some New Yorkers would say, that the pharmaceutical industrial complex, what's the acronym there, PIC, is there to pick your pocket. They're not there to make you healthy because, well, how silly would that be? They're here to market their way out of a sale? No, they're here to keep you on the medication merry-go-round. And if that medication doesn't work, we've got another one and another one and another one. And how long are you going to need that? Oh, my goodness, you'll need it for the rest of your life. I often say, if you went to a mechanic with a automobile with a mechanical problem, and the mechanic said, well, come back next week or tomorrow, come back tomorrow for your daily dose. QD is every day in medical terminology, QD. You'll have to come back tomorrow at the same time. You might look and say, well, how often will I have to come back to get the daily dose or to get the dose? Oh, every day. Well, how long will that last? The rest of your life. I would think you would look for a different freaking mechanic.
Yes.
But people just swallow this, no pun intended, see there, swallow medication. Just swallow this, and they don't think to ask, wait a minute, what's, I'm kind of on a merry-go-round here, and nothing seems to be changing. If anything, I'm becoming more disabled. And how do you get people out of that mindset?
So everything you're just speaking to is something I'm so eternally grateful for my own journey, because I think back to, 10 years ago, probably right around this time, my family doctor is roughly my age and had a life journey herself. And when I was going through a lot of challenges and struggles, rather than put me on medication and keep me on medication, she introduced me to cognitive behavior therapy. And it was the start of a life-changing journey for me to be able to look in the mirror. And much like the analogy of an onion, is the majority of people in our world will go to the bookstore, they'll go to the self-help section, they'll find a book that applies to the situation they're in, they'll get the book, they might read the first chapter, and then they'll say that it doesn't work, and they'll put the book down and they'll never do it again until the next element of trauma comes up in their life, and then they go to the bookstore and get another book and they read one chapter. Much like an onion, most people they'll dig through that first layer, they'll get scared, and then they'll run away. And then a life event will happen and they'll go back to the onion, but they'll end up going through the exact same layer again. So one of the things we work with individuals is to keep going through the fear and understanding that fear has been around since the moment that humans inhabited this earth, and it was there to keep us safe. It was there to ensure it was there to ensure that we don't burn ourselves, once we invented fire or get eaten by the dinosaurs.
Clinicians listening, listen to what Kevin is saying.
Yes,
Fear
definitely.
not bad. Fear is normal.
Yes,
And fear
normalize
is
it.
it's always telling us something. It's telling us to look deeper within ourselves. It's telling us that we have something unresolved from our journey that we need to figure out. And in my journey, I've experienced everything a human could possibly experience. And I've learned to embrace it. And I look back to, yes, there were those moments where fear kept me paralyzed and stuck and, cowering on the bathroom floor. But then when you learn how to, I think it's Brené Brown will say, or actually Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love author, Big Magic, one of my favorite books, fear is allowed to be in the car. It's just not allowed to play with the radio buttons.
That's awesome.
Don't mess with the radio.
Well, and something that I've noticed in working with people, it kind of bouncing off of what you said, Kevin, and also what Doc Heath said about normalizing all these things is I've had so many people, and I'm guessing everybody in this room has had this too, that will say, I bet you've never met anybody who's had as many troubles as I've had.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
think there's something abnormal about it, and it's like, no, you seem like a human to me. That you're going through difficult things and that they're happening. That's a pretty normal part of the process.
Do you say that? See, I go the other way.
Oh, do you?
No, I say, you're right. It's just you. I mean, I've done this 38 years. You've got to be the worst case I've ever run into. How did you survive this long? That's just terrible. Let's get to work right away.
And Sarah, you're so right, because at the end of the day, adversity, suffering, pain, that's the price of admission for being human. And if you are human, you are going to experience those things. And when people come to me, or even my friends that are close to me, and if they share with me, whatever adversity they're going through, I learned not to show my excitement and say to them, oh my God, it's so amazing that you're going through this right now, because they don't want to hear it. But I now get excited on the inside because I'm so looking forward to seeing what newness is going to be birthed in them as a result of the pain and the adversity and the tears and the suffering, because that is what pushes us to grow. It is the only thing that humans learn from is pain and suffering.
It's interesting you should put it that way. And I just love that. Of course, I'm a big word nerd. I have a library. I think I have 6,000 books currently. 1,600 of those are audiobooks. But I love words. And what newness is going to be birthed within us, how beautifully said. And I of course, I'm a male. I don't have that particular ability to give birth, except for big crazy ideas, and some of those come with some birth pains. But nothing like my wife went through birthing our son, who I think she went into labor at about midnight. When I was watching Jim Carrey play Andy Kaufman. And I was downstairs, she was upstairs, and I heard the scream, and the rest, they say, is history after goodness. It was much longer for her than me, but a lot of birth pains. And we have a mother sitting across from me, Debbie, was it very, these are the products of her birth pains, Sarah and Heather. And would you say that was a comfortable thing?
Oh my gosh.
No?
No.
Not comfortable?
Not comfortable.
Well, and that's my point, is that it's strange that we humans accept that birth of other humans, unless you're, goodness, even if you have a spinal block, I've heard it's still quite challenging. I wouldn't.
It is.
I wouldn't know. Even with a spinal block, huh?
Yes.
Even with the best medicine, it's still painful. But the expectation seems to be in our profession, well, how long is this going to take?
Yeah.
I'm going to call, I'm not going to name this person out of respect for them, but they run or ran a behavioral health panel that would refer people to me. And this was a conversation from the Twilight Zone when we were asking for more sessions to treat this patient that they'd sent over. And they said this, how much longer is this going to take? Well, my goodness, I don't know. I mean, if you're an OBGYN, how much longer is it going to take to pop that baby out? Well, crap, they don't know. It's a process. But here's what this person said to me. Well, I've just been to a seminar. Some of the worst ideas I've ever heard are preceded by the statement, well, I've just been to a seminar. Well, good for you. At the seminar, they heard that there's a movement in mental health for single session treatment.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I would like to say, and this was a woman I was talking to,
Wow.
and no disrespect to her, I'm not trying to be discourteous, but this is to make a point people can listen to. Try that out with the birth process.
Yeah.
Let's just get this baby out, and I don't know what. What's a typical session? 50 minutes?
Yeah.
Your birth process is now 50 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let's give that. But see,
Let's not get to it.
people think that they can live with the kind of mental narratives, psychological frameworks that they live with for decades. And then they come to Doc Heath, who I don't have one handy. I do have this. This is a spoon, but let's pretend it's a magic wand. That this magical wand spoon can be waved over them, and they pay their copay. I wave the magical spoon wand, and they are healed. Hallelujah. But gosh, what? There must be something in the water or something in what they're smoking, because I've never, and I've seen this happen 30 years. I've never seen that happen. What about what you do with folks, Kevin? That's kind of a process, I would guess.
And I say it to everyone I have a conversation with, regardless of your age, if it's taken you 45 years to get to this point of trauma and pain and fear and suppressing and pushing it down, it's probably going to take 45 years for you to unpack it and be able to find some joy and some freedom from, for the life that you're supposed to be leading. But it's so true, we live in this quicker, stronger, faster society where we just expect that we can go to the convenience store and buy happiness, buy joy, and we're going to be fine. And we're bombarded with these messages constantly from fire hose of social media and from TV that, all you have to do is buy this product or get this cream or, play this video game or watch this TV show. And that's what we really live in right now, is a massively addicted society. And whether you're addicted to alcohol or drugs or shopping or working or video games or sex or smoking, it doesn't really matter what the vice is, but that's what we have all around us as individuals that are choosing various addictions to run away from their pain and run away from their trauma because it's just easier.
Yes, I recall a story of a particular patient that after I described the cognitive behavioral therapy protocol said, Doc, that sounds really good. Gosh, I thought I had him on the hook. I thought, man, we're typically, I don't know, 8, 12 sessions for just normal worried well people. An old neuropsych professor of mine up in New York, Elkanah Goldberg, would call them the worried well, except he pronounced W's like a V. And then more complex things, you're looking at maybe, you don't have to live with me for the rest of your life, but you're looking at, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months. I've had patients for years at a time and some that would come and go. But this young man said to me, "Doc, that sounds all great. I think I'd rather just take a pill." Mm-hmm. And that's, we live in such a, just a Burger King mentality, come here, have it your way, SpongeBob mentality, 15-minute cures, that is just so very, very sabotaging. Nothing worthwhile in life happens at the speed of sound or light. Nothing worthwhile in life happens right away. You really have to buckle in.
It's like we have a society that just desires that instant gratification constantly.
Of course. That's the whole point of video games is shiny, shiny. The flashing lights and everything. And we need to start teaching young people that success is a pathway full of pebbles in your shoe. And what do you find, Kevin, with folks who they seem to want what you offer, but then they want to dictate the method in which you offer it?
The TherapyBites podcast is HIPAA compliant. No identifying patient information will be disclosed by TherapyBites podcast hosts or TherapyBites podcast guests without permission from patients or guardians. All personal stories are de-identified in order to comply with HIPAA, the NASW Code of Ethics, and the ethical principles of psychologists and code of conduct. Fresh from the therapy couch and from the deep dark recesses, stories may involve exploding preconceived notions and topics uncomfortable to underthinkers and small farm animals. Audience discretion and duct taping your head for safety is advised. Concrete-headed Kool-Aid drinking humans assume all risks associated with any possibility of choking to death on the accurate, realistic thoughts presented in the art lab. This is natural selection, and TherapyBites podcast management and hosts are not responsible.
Welcome to Fresh from the Therapy Couch, where we bring you T-ballers and listeners real-life stories of real-life people just like you and just like even all of us here at the T-ball team. I often get the question about sleep. I can't sleep. I try to go to sleep. I can't initiate sleep. I go to sleep and I don't stay asleep. And then I start asking questions about what we call sleep hygiene. What is your sleep regimen like? What time do you go to bed? How do you prepare yourself for bed? What do you do while you're in bed? And one of the greatest offenders I find is bathing the brain in blue light. Here's a good way to think of it. Look outside during the daytime and tell me what color the sky is. Oh, wow, it may be blue, you might see, if it's a nice day. Well, guess what color of light comes from your phones? Blue light. Now, the brain is heavily associated with being awake when the sky is blue. Why would you bathe your brain in the light that triggers your brain to be awake when you're trying to go to sleep? Do your brain a favor. Be brain friendly when it comes to sleep. Put up these devices that we call smartphones because they actually will do the opposite to you. Your brain during testing can actually drop a couple of IQ points just because of lack of sleep hygiene. Put away the blue light, it's only for the blue sky, and get a better night's sleep. Put your phone across the room, put it in a drawer, make it hard to get to. Way back before there were phones, people slept just fine without them. You can train your brain to sleep just fine without them too. Turn off the TV screens, turn off the laptops, turn off the smart pads. The only thing that sleep is for, well, there's really two things, but we'll talk about one of them. We'll leave one of them a secret, is sleep. Stop trying to do homework in bed, watch your favorite Netflix shows in bed, watch the next episode of your favorite TV show, and just program your brain to associate bed with sleep, and you'll find yourself counting sheep in no time. Now back to today's episode.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
You're slipping beneath the cushions of your bobble-headed psychotherapist's couch, leaving behind empty, echoing, cushy, comforting, pseudo-psychological claptrap, moving into a deeper dimension of your own mind, where distorted thinking, hurting, hopelessness, and regret evaporate into clarity, healing, renewed hope, and newfound resilience. That's the podcast sign up ahead. Your next stop, Therapy Bites Psych Secrets.
Hey, T-Ballers. Thanks for taking this break from the episode. We'll be right back after this. You know, in the DSM, in its sixth revision now, the DSM-5 TR, back when we first started off, it was the size of a pamphlet. Now it's the size of a small set of encyclopedias. But in that book, it talks about mood disorders. I disagree. I think it's time for my field of psychology to wake up, smell the coffee, accept real life, and realize that moods cannot be disordered, though thinking can be. Stop trying to change your mood and start trying to change your thinking. Your life will be better because of it, and that's your psych secret for today. Here comes the rest of the episode. Enjoy.
Once again, Doc Heath rips the cushions from the couch, dishes the dirt, lets the cat out of the bag, uncorks the bottle, letting the genie escape, and blows the lid off of another of the universe's psych secrets.
Here's Heath and the T-Ball Team.
Well, and I think one to piggyback what you were just speaking of is I firmly do believe that every single person we interact with, every single person we meet, every single person we have a relationship with, every single person that we work for or work with, they are our teacher. And the universe is a fabulous trickster and a jokester, is that we are constantly, people are going to be constantly put in our path to test us and to challenge us and to encourage us to grow and to become more mature, more compassionate, more empathetic. And it's much like, you know, the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy went on her own journey where she met the most broken parts of herself in the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, to then be able to, in essence, go through the dark night of the soul and the biggest trial of her journey when she fell asleep in that meadow. And isn't that such a great metaphor for life? Most of us are just walking around asleep, to then get to the end of the journey where she learned so much about herself, to then realize it was all an illusion. And she, as that witch said, she had the power to go home all the time. She just didn't know she had the power to go home. And so that is the reminder that I try and impart on everyone is, yes, it's a journey. Yes, you're going to find parts of yourself that you didn't even know exist. They're going to be dark. They're going to be scary. They're going to cause you to well up with emotion. But if you can stick through it and stick through your journey, you're going to have that beautiful result at the end. And even for myself, I just got back from vacation a couple weeks ago, and there's one moment I was meditating on the beach, and a memory came to me from 2013 that I completely, totally blocked out. And it was an incredibly emotional moment for me to remember that. And that is that journey of life, is we just have to keep unwrapping the onion and going deeper and deeper into ourselves until we get to that point where we find ourselves.
You know, I think that's an excellent point because, and by the way, not to get too personal here, brother, but when you were talking about Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, you just gave me my fuzzy wuzzy for the day. It started at the top of my head. It traveled through my spine down to my toes, and that was just awesome.
That's
I think
universal. It's a universal whisper because I got it when you were talking about Viktor Frankl, one of my favorite books. And I always say those are those moments where the divine is guiding us that you're on the right path.
And we're going to have to get to that in our episode. We sure do, the divine and the spiritual. But I think that that we really don't know what we know. There's a thing in psychology called blind sight, that we really don't know what we know. And I think that's the value of what we do as clinicians, and the value of what you do as a life coach, a consultant, a trainer, is it's not that we bring all this guru level knowledge to the table. Sure, we bring some, as I said, I have lots of books, lots of degrees, but we're really there to help you listeners and viewers on our YouTube channel discover things about yourself that you may not even be aware of. I find that people routinely underthink about themselves and their value and their potential and their place in the universe. And I tell people, we're in Arkansas, and it's a big duck hunting state, not too far from here, Stuttgart. That's not in Germany. I had an old graduate school professor pronounce it Stuttgart. No. That's in Germany. We pronounce it Stuttgart, and that's the duck hunting capital of the world. What you do for a living, Kevin, and what we do, we're kind of duck guides. We're not here to, quote, shoot your ducks for you. We're just a duck guide, And but let's talk about spirituality, because I know that's something that's important to you. It's certainly something important to us. But how can we integrate that into this discussion?
Off camera at the start of the podcast, we were talking, it's such a loaded word. And what I've come to realize is that everyone has their traumatic past with religion and spirituality. And, regardless of what the story is behind, we put so many labels on what religion is and what spirituality is. And media will talk, religious wars and religious battles. And how it came for myself is I was born and raised Roman Catholic. And like all good Catholics, I fell away from the church in my early teens. And it was when my father was diagnosed with cancer that we lived 5-hour drive away from each other. And I thought my dad was a religious person. And so I undertook to read the Bible cover to cover for that first year, because I thought it would give me something to talk about with my father over the phone while he was going through cancer treatment. And every day I would read a passage, and it would make me happy, it would make me sad, it would make me frustrated. It brought up a whole range of emotions. But in that whole period of time, I realized that my father wasn't religious. My father was spiritual. He believed in a higher power. He believed that there was something else guiding us. And religion was his community. Religion was the way he connected with other people around him. And I thought that was really interesting. So I then undertook to read almost every single spiritual text on earth, to realize that at the end of the day, they all say the same thing in different words. They all have a greater connection to something around us. And what I've learned in my own journey is that when you can step out of yourself and hand the power over and get out of your way, life becomes a lot easier. And unfortunately for myself, it took me a lot of falling down, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And it was a moment, it was actually 7 years ago on Friday, where I was in an oncologist's office myself. And the oncologist said, "You have cancer." And in that moment, I just looked up to the heavens and I said, "I've got it. I understand. I'm listening. I surrender." And that to me is spirituality. It's not, going to a building 7 days a week and saying the same thing over and over, or writing a big check. It's that inner conversation I have with whatever an individual wants to call it, whether it's God or nature or the universe. To me, they're all interchangeable. And ever since that one moment of getting out of my own way and handing the power over to be guided, life has become a lot simpler.
I completely agree. I like to think of religion is mechanics. There's nothing wrong with mechanics. I call myself the neuromechanic. I'm all about the fiddle-faddling of the neurons, neuropsychology, and neuroscience. There's nothing wrong with mechanics. Religion is mechanics. Spirituality is about meaning. Religion is mechanics. Spirituality is meaning. And that can go very, very, very deep, you know, and your spirituality can be very, very different than mine. Because, I mean, I have Christians come and tell me, and sometimes, you know, folks of many other faiths, Islam, and I will ask them, you know, what's your purpose in this religion or this lifestyle that you've chosen? And they always talk about mechanics. They talk about doing good. They talk about tithing, showing up every time the doors of the church or the tabernacle or the mosque are open or whatever. But that's all mechanics. And what I don't hear are people describing spirituality as a relationship in which they can find meaning. And this is just my belief. You listeners, viewers are welcome to think or believe whatever you want. I'm all about the freedom to believe, but my belief is it is about a relationship. It is, for me, a relationship with my Creator. And to kind of pull from what I heard someone say many years ago, well, how do you know your Creator ever even exists? And I said, well, I talked to them this morning. Because it's for me, it's just, well, me and my Creator. It doesn't involve me, my Creator, and a third party, pastor, minister, priest, or whatever, even, you know, my family members. It's just me and them. And that's a relationship in which I find meaning. What's your perception of spirituality and how that kind of guides your life and your work, Kevin?
I think I touched on it in my last few words, is surrender. A big part of being able to move forward in this life is surrender. And believing in a higher power, believing in a creator, a God, the greater mysteries of the universe, it's impossible to surrender unless you believe that there's something else out there.
And is that also, I mean, did you have to kind of get straight in your mind what you have control over and what you don't have control over? Because your reaction to that cancer diagnosis blew me away. That I completely did not expect you to say that. How do you sort that out so well as you did, what you control and what you don't?
Well, when we finally got to that point in 2015, it had been an 11-year journey where it was one traumatic event after another. And I do believe the universe was guiding me and, in essence, whittling my ego away. You know, and I've heard other speakers refer to ego as edge God out. And I really do resonate with that, is that we create this persona, we wear these masks of what we portray to others. But at the end of the day, and my tagline is, love the life you were meant to lead. Not the life that society told you to lead, not the life that your parents want you to lead, not the life that your, people around you are encouraging you to do, the life that when you get out of your own way naturally unfolds. And I think about often, right, the caterpillar to the butterfly. Scientists have a decent idea as to what happens inside, but they've never been able to see it, because as soon as you open up the chrysalis where the caterpillar is, the whole process is over. Or a rose. If you try to, make a rose bloom faster by peeling away the petals, it's going to die. And this is part of this greater journey where, by the time I was diagnosed with cancer, I really came to understand, we are standing on a rock that's been around for billions of years, that's hurtling through space, and we have absolutely no control. Or to make it a bit more real, is if you're sitting on a plane and you're sitting in seat 37C, you have zero control over what's going to be happening in the cockpit. You have to breathe, trust, and let go. And I just don't think without a spiritual belief that you're able to let go and surrender and let happen whatever will happen.
Fantastic. That's such great wisdom.
Something that I've noticed as we've been talking, is when we're talking about suffering, and this is more of a statement than necessarily a question, but when we're talking about suffering, I think a lot of people have a hard time kind of finding their own meaning or purpose in what happens. And I'll tell a bit of a comical story to get my point across. Now, my husband came home one day, and he was being a booger. Don't come at him for this. He was being a goober head. And he was like, I was talking to the guys today, and we determined that, and I'm going to be the shock jock for once instead of Dr. Heath. He said, we determined that getting kicked in the nuts is worse than having a child. And I was like, okay, well, how did you determine that? He said, well, you see women having multiple children. You don't see guys going up to other guys and saying, please kick me in the nuts. And I said, okay, sweetheart, here's what you're missing on. You're missing out on the purpose. So when a woman goes through childbirth, and here's where I'm going to get serious.
Wow.
When a woman goes through childbirth, the whole purpose that she goes through that pain and suffering is because she's thinking about the joy of the little bundle of life that she's going to bring into the world. That's her whole focus. It's not about, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go through so much pain to get there. The focus is on, I get to bring a life into the world.
Your husband, does he have a head injury?
He was, like I said, he was being a goober.
Did you give him a head injury after this conversation? Bless his heart.
I thought
Wow.
about testing out his theory, though. No, I'm just kidding.
Ignorance is not always bliss.
Yes, but no. But just kind of going back to, you have to kind of find purpose and meaning in the suffering that you experience. And it might not just pop up. You might have to find it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Interesting. And I feel like what you just said could be a whole other podcast. But there's a challenge, and I find that, and again, in this broken world we're living in, when individuals have gaping holes within themselves, whether it is, they will go out and be in a relationship for all the wrong reasons, or, and I see this in my own work, a lot of individuals will, they'll say, if I just have a child, my life will be complete. Mm-hmm. And so that becomes another challenge is, yes, they are going through the suffering for a purpose, but not always is the purpose going to be linked to joy.
Right.
Mm.
And I find that also, Kevin, is that people really lack in general a ability to be in the present. Mm-hmm. And find value in the present. And one of the things I find with change is really not so much change, but people wanting things to be different. Mm-hmm. It's here's something I did prefer. How quickly can I change it to the next thing, which may be the more preferred thing? Mm-hmm. And I often use the analogy. Imagine you had your own book of life, and that book had pick a number, 36,000 pages in it, but this page was an experience you didn't prefer and you ripped it out. Well, then your brain, the way it's engineered, would go to the next least preferred experience, and if you could rip that out, you would go to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, and finally, your book would be a pamphlet, and you would live a pamphlet-thick life, which really isn't much of a life anyway. And one of my colleagues, a wonderful, wonderful psychologist and also Buddhist monk, by the way, Dr. David Zuniga, I stole this from him, but I am giving him credit, so I won't have to send him a nickel in the mail, is that if you keep missing the moments of your life, all of a sudden you've missed the whole day. And if you keep missing them, then eventually you will have missed your own life. And so at those moments which are non-preferred, I think the best thing you can do is dig down deep and find value and meaning in those moments, and not waste those moments trying to change to the next moment. Because in life, we have our moments.
100%. And I find that the majority of individuals are either angry about the past or scared about the future. And we're missing out on that individual moment that's right here. The past is gone. You can't do anything about it. The future's not promised to us. We have no idea what that's going to play out. But we're living in a world that is telling us to suppress those emotions rather than actually deal with them and come back into that present moment.
Yeah, and instead of embracing them and seeing emotions as a normal part of life. And I know parents that they will miss the childhood of their kids' entire childhood. They'll miss the entire childhood of their children because they're just looking for the next moment. I've got to get to the next thing. I've got to get dinner made, and then I've got to get the bills paid, and then I've got to get their teeth brushed, and then I've got to get them to bed, and then I've got to get to sleep myself, and then I got to get the next day. And they are forever missing those moments, and then one of these days you'll just be dead. And you will have missed all of that. And if the listeners, the viewers, take nothing else away today, is that instead of viewing change as a catastrophe, view it as a fresh opportunity. And Kevin, if you would share with us some top tips. What are some pro tips on how people can put some shoe leather on that and start right away? I mean, as soon as this episode is over and people are done listening and watching, what can they go out today and start doing that makes a difference in their lives?
The number one thing that anyone can do, wherever they are, whatever their background, their education, the experience that they're dealing with, is find the silence and ask themselves, what is this moment trying to teach me? And to sit with that question, and maybe ask that question 2 or 3 times of yourself. Because once you dig down and get the answer of what is this moment trying to teach me, then real freedom, joy will start to show up.
Amazing. Hey, there's those fuzzy wuzzies again.
Yes.
They're back. They're back. That is such marvelous wisdom. You folks listening, please don't miss that. Write that down. Don't do it while you're driving, by the way. Pull over the side of the road. Make a note. If you're jogging, stop jogging. You don't want to get run over, run someone else over, and write that down. There's so much wisdom in that. We thank you so much, Kevin, for being here. It has been such a marvelous episode. We've got to have you back sometime. Tell us, how can people get in touch with you? We'll put your contact stuff in the show notes, but tell us about how you work with people and you prefer for them to reach out to you.
My website is Kevin T, as in Thomas, Cahill.com. The T between my first name and my last name is significant for my own journey, as my father's first name was the same initial. I'm there. I blog. All of your usual social media channels can be found off of that website. And in all honesty, I would love to hear from anyone who watched this episode. If anything resonated with you, I would love to drop me a note. I'd love to hear your story.
And that's such a wonderful thing to say. Yes, please do share your stories. Share it with Kevin. Share it in the comments. Pick a few things that really stuck out to you about the episode. Share this out to somebody that could use some life-invigorating Yes, that is an Ant-Man term. Some life and beginning wisdom. I think Kevin brought it to us today. It's like a buffet. You can eat all of it that you want, so cram your brain full of it. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, for being here, and we'll catch you guys on the next Therapy Bites Art Lab podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, T-Ballers, thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in. And join the T-Ball Team. Next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Welcome, T-Ballers, to another great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab, which stands for Accurate Realistic Thinking and Life-Affirming Beliefs. And do we have a treat for you today? When I was a kid, I just loved magic, and our special guest has some magic for you today that's going to embiggen your relationship style in business and in life. Mr. Peter Anthony is joining us, and he is a world-class consultant. And today on Therapy Bites, we will talk about Calabradabra, the magical psychology of communication. And we hope you join us then.
Government legal gobbledygook. Therapy Bites is not intended as a diagnostic or as an alternative to professional clinical treatment. Resources and advice are for information and entertainment purposes only. Brought to you by someone saying things you don't like? Tape that nagging loudmouth shut. Government-approved speech tape. Gas tape. Now available at your local hardware store. Therapy Bites Art Lab is not an approved, endorsed, authorized, butt-kissing affiliate of the United States Special Offense Assessment Police. SOAP for short. Warning. Consumption of Therapy Bites Art Lab content by Kool-Aid drinking, stinking, thinking, social media, pseudo-psychological pushing, wacky woke, anti-free speech, mumbo-jumbo advocates may cause spontaneous internal skull combustion, stomach discomfort, and/or laxative effects. Allergy warning. Therapy Bites is manufactured in a facility that challenges nutty distortions, processes nuggets of accurate, realistic thinking, and life-affirming beliefs. This is the audio version of the legal fine print. Why are you still listening to this when you can catch the next great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab with a good friend or family member? Really? Are you still there? This is getting silly. Move on to the next psychologically thrilling episode of the best advice on the net. No copay required.
Me eat copay.
Yeah, with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. Go ahead, don't be podgorophobic. Scoot, scoot, scoot. On to the next episode.